That total dollar figure of $83 million was 8 times higher than what they initially were asking for.
Donald Trump. So, of course, he had a week that began very well with that New Hampshire Republican primary ending, but it's now not gone so well for him. He faces a bill of $83 million for defaming the writer E Jean Carroll. Now, Carroll claimed Trump had lied about sexually assaulting her in the 1990s. She called the order a huge defeat for every bully. Now, he, of course, has been out and about on social media. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I don't even know who this woman is. I have no idea who she is, where she came from. This is another scam. It's a political witch hunt. And somehow we're going to have to fight this stuff. We cannot let our country go into this abyss. This is disgraceful.
Well, let's now catch up with Liz Landers, who's a freelance US political correspondent. Liz, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, look, a huge amount of money in damages
Yeah.
awarded. Now, was that a surprise to people, that level of damages?
I think it was a surprise, yes, especially because it was much more than what E. Jean Carroll and her attorneys were asking for. And this verdict was returned quickly within 3 hours by this New York jury. And they awarded her the $83 million total, and $65 million of that is punitive damages. That total dollar figure of $83 million was 8 times higher than what they initially were asking for. So, yes, when this came back yesterday, I think this was quite a surprise to all the political reporters and legal experts who had been following this.
And why was the damages so high? Why was that?
Yeah, during this trial, E. Jean Carroll's lawyers made the case that former President Trump has one of the largest, if not the largest, megaphone in the world to speak about people. He has so widely followed still and is now running for president again, of course, here in the US, and that he continued to defame her even after that initial verdict was returned last year, which I think you mentioned, that he was found liable in this civil court in New York for sexually abusing her. And so this whole case was about how much he owed her, what the damages were for defaming her and that instance of sexual abuse. So her lawyers basically said that he continued to defame her even after that verdict had been reached. And there was a lot of back and forth in the courtroom with the former president's attorneys, Alina Habba, and the judge about what Trump could say and what their defense could say, because he was not allowed to get up there and just say, none of this is true. It's a witch hunt. The kinds of things that he can say on social media and say outside of a courtroom, he was not allowed to say in the courtroom because it had already been determined in the case that he had defamed her and sexually abused her. So I
Right.
think that her attorneys were kind of making that point throughout the trial and saying, how is she ever going to get her name and reputation back? She's going to need a lot of work to do that. And she's going to need money and protection. And also, it's a security thing, too, for her. So that was kind of their argument.
Interesting. So it almost came down to the sheer kind of might of Donald Trump. The fact that, let's be honest, he's probably, from a platform point of view and from having probably got the loudest voice on the planet. Such is his reach and such is his sort of platform. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. It was interesting that Trump's lawyer went out and gave a very sort of visceral attack on the lawyers for the journalist, and made a really big attack on the whole kind of court, didn't she?
Yeah, I mean, Alina Habba has been a really staunch defender of President Trump's in several of these legal battles that he is dealing with. She's also representing him, if I'm remembering this correctly, in a separate case, a separate legal case that he's dealing with as well in Florida. And she seems to be very politically aligned with him as well, in addition to being his lawyer. And she has gone out there in force and defended him in interviews, talking to the public,
Mm.
and saying that there have been no merits to this case, reiterating what Trump says, that he does not remember her. You were playing that clip. So, sort of, yeah, I mean, she has been a very staunch defender of his, but of course, I guess it was not enough to sway the jury in this case because that verdict was really quite shocking.
Now, many are seeing this as a sort of victory for women, but is this actually going to sort of lose him support? Because it feels like every time he's attacked, his base sort of cling to him more.
Yeah, and I think that polling reflects that as well. If you look at the moments in the last year or so when indictments have been brought against former President Trump, that is when he has seen a surge in support. He's also been fundraising off of these various legal issues that he's had, and he has fundraised a lot of money, which indicates that there are supporters of his out there who see these legal trials, something like this E Jean Carroll case, potentially the January 6th case that he is facing here in Washington, D.C., and they respond to that by donating money to his campaign. I do not see
Mm.
this as being uh, negatively affecting him right now, especially for this case where I think that
Um,
there are a lot of nuances to this case and to this trial
I mean,
specifically, whereas I think more people sort of
okay.
understand the January 6th thing.
One of our listeners, Lisa's just messaged in saying the orange genius is beginning to sound a tad unhinged. Not that his base cares. These cases are grist to their mill, and the more outraged we sound, the more votes he attracts. Lisa, I think that is completely correct. But the big question is can he have, how's he going to afford this bill? Is this
Yeah.
bill going to damage his campaign, or is he just now raking in so much money he can absorb it?
Well, that's a good question. I was actually looking at what happens next in terms of when and how Eugene Carroll will get this money. Apparently, he had to put $5.5 million into a court-controlled account last year in a step towards satisfying that judgment in the defamation lawsuit, though Carroll is not going to get this money until all of the appeals run out.